Hey guys, welcome back to Caffeinated Comic Books. I am your host, the king of caffeine, monarch of the mocha, and ruler of the roast. Today, I kind of just want to talk at you for a minute or two. Well, maybe a little bit longer than that. This is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. What is the biggest problem in comics right now, in the comic industry, kind of as a whole? Now, obviously, there are a lot of problems, and so especially things that have kind of come to light over the course of the last year. And it's taken me a little bit of time to kind of make those thoughts more or less concise and group them in a manner that I feel makes the most sense. So I guess I'll just get into it. The biggest problem in comics now, we've got a lot of things, right? We've got comic books are at an all-time high for cover price. We've got most of DC's books at $4, a lot of Marvel books at $5, even higher when you take into account annuals or number ones or special issues if it hits number 25 or number 50 or whatever. So things like that. And the way the market is, I've got a business background, so excuse me for the business jargon here, but the way the market works in a free market society is people decide what the right price is for things. Now, the suppliers, they can set the price to whatever they want, but us, the consumer, the buyer, we determine whether or not we're willing to pay that price. And if we're not willing to pay that price, then we force the hand of the manufacturer, of the supplier, of the provider, of whatever good or service to lower that price. And there's a lot of give and a lot of take there, and very seldom does it work out that the exact price that the seller wants to receive is the exact price that the consumer wants to pay, right? It doesn't work, but there's a lot of back and forth, but that's how you have a healthy market and in a healthy competitive environment and competitive market. But the problem within comics right now is we're not getting that. We're getting $4 books, $5 books, $6 books, and beyond that, but we aren't getting the quality that we're willing to pay for that. Now, I would be happy. Sure, we always want to pay less. As consumers, we always want to pay less. And sellers always want to sell for higher. This is just how it works. But there's a certain value that justifies a given price. And that's not what we're getting. I would be more apt to pay for not so much $6 for a book if I felt like I was getting that kind of a value out of it. Now, I'm also a gamer, and I like to determine the value of my games based on one simple thing. Sure, there might be many other little things in it, but it really comes down to this for me. How many hours of enjoyment did I get out of the video game per dollar spent on it? And that's a hard thing to measure with comic books because you're paying, again, $4, $5, and so forth dollars for a book that you're going to go through probably, depending on how fast you read, how much you're looking at every little detail on the page in each panel, 15, maybe 20 minutes. I mean, there are some books that are obnoxiously wordy that I have a difficult time getting through, and they take me a little bit longer because it's like somebody, I don't know, decided to dump their term paper into a comic book, and it's just taking that long. The word count is obscene. But barring that, and regardless, those are usually not the most enjoyable books to read anyway, it's really hard to find what that value per dollar is for comic books. So that's one thing, right? There are a lot of things that can be done to kind of skirt around that. I'm certainly no expert when it comes to the industry and industry standards and the inner workings of it. That's something maybe best left for a question for Ethan Van Sciver or someone else who has been in the industry for some time, maybe John Malin, Mike S. Miller, Doug Tenable, these guys that have been, in the industry for years and they know their stuff. But there are things that we as consumers can do. We can wait for back issues. We can wait for sales. We can wait for half price stuff, this and that. My local comic book shop has half price off of back issues. It's fantastic, especially if I'm looking just for, a few issues here and there or trying to collect a handful. You go into whatever 25 or 50 cent bins or dollar bins. These are great things, but you can't do that and stay current. You're usually in one place or another, unless you just have an immense amount of expendable income, which more power to you. I wish I had that. To where you're either choosing to stay current on a handful of titles, weekly or bi-weekly, whatever it ends up being, or you're channeling and redirecting those funds into back issues. And actually, that's something that we're seeing more and more people doing. And I actually would not be surprised if we see an increase in price on certain back issues, not all. But I've noticed a shift of certain titles, or at least certain runs, from 50 cent bins, dollar bins. I've seen them shift and kind of migrate into normal back issue bins, because people are beginning to realize, these issues are very good. There's a lot of value here already, and even on paying $3 for a back issue, it's still cheaper than any book that's out right now, or most of them. I can't remember the last time a DC book was $2.99. They used to have a slogan, didn't they? Holding the line or drawing the line at $3.99. I think that's what it was. Drawing the line at $2.99. Not doing that anymore. And there are a number of reasons for that, I'm sure. Costs go up for supplies, and artists and writers want to be paid more, etc. That's something entirely different. But really, you have other publishers as well. You've got guys like Alterna Comics, who are managing to sell books at prices that are half or even less than half the cover price of most books that you see on the stands at your local comic shop. And this is pretty crazy, and it's coming down to they were able to do that simply by changing the type of paper that they're using in their books. Now, there's obviously more than likely some other things within that, but changing back to newsprint, which, admittedly, sure, the page isn't going to look as pretty, but you're still seeing the artwork, and the artwork can still look great. They have nice glossy covers for the books. So that's an interesting route to go that they're deciding to do. And I'd be very curious to see moving forward how much more profitable year over year, right? Because the measure of growth is, okay, are we making more this year than we are last year? I'd be very curious to see if that's something that winds up happening. The next thing, which has been a major talking point over the course of the last year or so, but it's something that comic book professionals, at least some of them, and most importantly, the comic book community, us, the fans, the readers, the ones with money in hand, willing to give it to those who are going to give us the product we want, is all of this social justice warrior propaganda in comic books, and the far leftist proselytizing that we get out of a lot of these books now. And you're starting to see the effects of that now more so than ever because of things like Comicsgate and so forth. I mean, you have books being canceled and relaunched with unbelievable impunity. Each time a book is canceled and then relaunched, there's a small bit of hope in me that, maybe this time they'll get it together. They're not gonna be preaching at me from their pulpit. I don't care about your politics. I don't care about your social leanings, whatever it is, by and large, keep it out of my comic books. I mean, keep it out of my entertainment in general, preferably, but that's, a perfect world, which is not what we're living in. And I'm always let down, right? And most of you, I'm sure, are more than well aware of this from books like Ms. Marvel, she's not Ms. Marvel. The way they've been portraying Captain Marvel, who's the real Ms. Marvel, though there was one prior to her as well. I'm a bigger fan of OG Carol Danvers' Ms. Marvel. I thought she was a very entertaining character, very interesting, charismatic. She was a bombshell. I mean, that doesn't hurt. I'm a blue-blooded American male. I'm going to admit it. But things like that, and you get these books constantly canceled and relaunched, and it's a drag for us, the readers, because we have that half hope, at least, that they're going to get it right this time, and they don't. And then a book gets canceled by the 10th or 12th issue. But truthfully, I think it's more simplistic than those. Although, I think the overarching issue that I feel is very simplistic, though multifaceted it may be, which I'll get to in a second here, it does encompass those same problems. And it comes down to this: industry leaders not giving the fans, consumers, us, again, money in hand. We're the hungry patron, and the comic industry, whatever publisher it may be, whether you're diehard Marvel, diehard DC, or you don't discriminate and you like both, or maybe you're an Image fan, Top Cow, Aspen, whatever it may be, Dark Horse. They are like the hot dog stand, and they have to offer us something of value for us to give them our money. We all work hard for our money. It's industry leaders not giving us, the fans, what we want. Giving your consumers what they want out of your product. Good value for dollars spent on entertaining stories with fun characters, etc. This is, and those in a successful business, those are concomitant of one another, right? They really go hand in hand. One equals the other. You have one, you're going to get the other. But comic pros, at least a lot of them, not all, they're not giving us consumers really any of these, because we're not only getting overpriced books, we're also not getting entertaining books. But on top of all that, we're getting books that are proselytizing whatever that given writer's political or social leanings are. Who cares about your politics? I don't care about your politics. Whatever side of the aisle you're on, stay there. I don't care. But at work, I've always had a rule with my associates, my employees, and this is something that is just, I think, very staple for a professional environment. We all have crap in our lives, and we all have personal opinions and beliefs and things in our lives. You leave all that at the door when you clock in for work. Comic book writers write from home. When you're writing, think of it as clocking in for work. Leave your crap at the door, whatever that means for you. So they're not giving us any of those, any of the things we actually want. So instead of growing their business, as responsible professionals should strive to do always, again, year over year, you want growth. They're degrading and eroding away like limestone, right, on a sea cliff, just faster and faster year over year. So instead of growth, we're getting degradation. Their current practices aren't attracting new readers or consumers. In point of fact, they're losing their base. That's one of the biggest things. You must retain your base, because those are the diehards, right? Those are the people. I'm a Batman fan, so I am always going to buy Batman, or I'm always going to go see a Batman movie, whatever that means. Diehard Star Wars fan, etc. You could really move this into any part of the entertainment industry. Video games, right? Diehard, whatever, Call of Duty fans that buy it year over year, even though it's the same thing. Nothing against you Call of Duty players. I suck at it. I can't play the game. So they're losing their base, who are either now buying less because there are far fewer books that they find entertaining and containing enough entertainment value for them to justify spending the money and giving these publishers their money, or they're buying none at all. They're just, they wipe their hands of it. They're like, you know what, I'm done. I'm just going to stick to the movies. Every, summer I'll go see a couple of superhero films, whether it's the MCU, the DCEU, now that they're getting their act together, whatever that looks like. They're just done. They're leaving comics in general, or worse yet, for these big publishers, they're buying elsewhere, right? Alterna Comics, all of these Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns. The money is there. The consumer is there. There's a demand. The issue is not with the demand. The issue is with the supply. The suppliers are not supplying a product that there's actually a demand for. So what are the consumers doing? They are looking elsewhere for someone else to supply them with what they want. If these publishers ceased with the nonsense, if they did a 180 to a place of actually following through with these, honestly, primitive consumer asks, right? Give me something that's good value for my dollar. Doesn't even have to be phenomenal value. Just give me good value for my dollar. And then just make simple course corrections when necessary. I mean, there's no such thing really. Well, maybe there was. But for the most part, we'll just say there's really no such thing as a perfect run of a comic. Put whatever title you want up. If you disagree, leave me a comment below, and we can debate if that run was flawless. I'd argue that there's no such thing as a truly flawless run on a comic. Okay, if there's one that just comes to fairly recent memory, you can leave a comment down below if you disagree. Green Lantern Rebirth is probably the epitome, at least in modern comics. So we're saying from the 2000s till present, that is as close to a flawless story arc as you get. But we can debate that in the comments if you like. But just give us good value. Make the simple course corrections, because you're going to have issues. But be smart and be aware, be cognizant of what your consumers want. Be fluid, be flexible, right? Have some elasticity where you see a drop in sales and you pay attention to what your consumers are saying about your product and say, oh, okay, well, let's do a little twist here, a little tweak here, a little nip and a tuck there, and let's make sure we're getting them what they want, so that they not only continue to buy, but maybe they convince their friends and their coworkers and their family members, etc., to also buy. Again, growing your business. So they just did these things. Not only would they be, just up in sales, the industry as a whole would be healthier. Now, there's a deeper part of this, and I think maybe a more specific part of it, rather. And that's, why do comic creators or editors, guys like Dan DiDio over at DC, or Joe Quesada over at Marvel, why do they persist and insist on placing their own preferences ahead of those of the fans? It's a very interesting question. It's a perplexing one, because as a businessman, I don't understand why one would make that choice. I actually had the pleasure and opportunity to ask Comic Artist Pro Secrets, Ethan Van Sciver, on a live stream the other night if he had any insight on this. You know, he's a 26-year veteran of the comic book industry. He's worked on all sorts of comics, from X-Men, he worked on Impulse, he worked on, obviously his most iconic work is Green Lantern Rebirth, Flash Rebirth. He did an arc on the Superman-Batman team-up comic books, which those are some of my favorite comic books, not necessarily just the ones that he did, but in general, of the last couple of decades. And he's worked on others. You know, obviously he just had his big Cyberfrog Indiegogo campaign, which blew up. But I got the chance to ask him if he had any insight on this. And specifically because he has worked for years with the current editor-in-chief over at DC Comics. So, according to Ethan Van Sciver, and this is something that I've suspected and heard kind of rumblings of for a while now, so I was kind of able to put, you know, two and two together, but hearing it from someone who actually had direct experience with this, it was clarifying, right? And it was validating. It was a confirmation of sorts. And he said DiDio doesn't like legacy characters. He thinks they age the other heroes, that preceded them too much. And there's a little bit of paraphrasing. He sees that as a huge problem, which, in fact, really no one else sees it that way. No one really thinks that. You ask most DC fans who some of their favorite, you know, list your top 5 DC characters, a very high percentage of them is going to have 1 or 2 legacy characters in that top 5 list. Definitely in a top 10. I mean, the vast majority of DC fans love Dick Grayson, Nightwing, both guys and girls. Wally West, The Flash, Tim Drake, Robin / Red Robin, Kid Flash, you got Superboy, etc. and so forth. And then EVS also had this to say about DiDio putting his own preferences above fans. He said, DiDio sees the DCU as a box of a bunch of action figures that he feels have to be organized in a certain way, his way. And this is why he's obsessed with all these big tragic crisis events instead of just fun stories. So thank you, Uncle E, for offering that insight there. I really appreciate that. Having that confirmation of things that have kind of been rumbling around and rattling around in my brain for some time now was a really good feeling. You know, we've also seen this at Marvel for years, right, with Peter Parker as a result of Joe Quesada and his infamous One More Day story, garbage tier. I'm not going to get into One More Day here because I'll rant for hours. We've seen this over at DC over and over with Dan DiDio's own hatred for legacy characters like Dick Grayson, Wally West, and more. He's constantly wanting to either kill or leave in a state of irrelevancy characters like them and Kyle Rayner, which has caused problems not just for his fans, which is obviously the most important, but also with other creators who understand that these characters are important to the longevity and expansion of the universe. So here's a crucial point. Contrary to DiDio's mental problem here, characters must be allowed to grow and mature. They don't have to age into their 90s. We don't need Peter zipping around with friggin' walking sticks, you know, strapped to his back as well. But they should be allowed to grow nonetheless. And this is not the same as changing them entirely in the manner that guys like Tom King or Brian Michael Bendis do with their books. These iconic characters should always remain the same at their cores. However, growth is necessary. This allows said characters to add a mentor facet to themselves, which in turn helps to elevate and improve the younger heroes. This is exemplified in such examples as the Flash family, with Jay Garrick or Barry Allen being a mentor to Wally West, who in turn mentored Bart Allen, and so forth. And furthermore, writers have to stop inserting themselves into the characters to the point where every character in the book is exactly the same, and that is to say they're just an illustrated version of that particular writer. You see this with Tom King and Bendis all the time, and I keep insisting on using them as examples because they're really the biggest names as far as writing over at DC, except for maybe Snyder, which I'm a big Snyder guy as far as his writing goes. They're the biggest names at DC right now, while simultaneously, I think, being heavily responsible for the exodus en masse of fans and consumers. Guys, Tom King, Brian Michael Bendis, you're not 6 years old anymore pretending that these characters are you. It's your responsibility as writers, as supposed caretakers of this storied universe you've been given the reins to. It's your responsibility to uphold these icons, not render their books irrelevant and unreadable because you've presented them in an unrecognizable manner. It's pretentious, it's irresponsible, and it's going to result in the collapse of an industry and unemployment of a great number of people. I don't get it. As consumers, we don't ask for a lot. Sure, we can be finicky, we can be fickle at times, but it's easy to course correct. It's easy to see what's not working. All you have to do is look at the financials, look at the numbers, look at the sales, and you see that what you're doing isn't working. Well, when what you're doing isn't working, what do? You do something else. Anyway, that's it for this one, guys. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the video, what you think of this kind of content. Let me know if you'd like to see more of this kind of content from me, more of these sort of esoteric, discussionary videos, rather than just the kind of D&C style comic book reviews. I'm sorry that the quality on those is somewhat low at the moment. I am trying to find avenues to improve upon that. Looking into maybe getting a Comixology account going. That way I can maybe do reviews on digital versions of the books. That's something I'm looking into. But again, guys, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the video. Let me know if you agree or disagree. This is a discussion. Yes, this was me talking at you, but it was me talking at you with the intent of getting a conversation going, getting a dialogue, a discourse, and that's how things improve. I think the majority of us comic book consumers want to see the industry last. We want to see it improve. We want to see it healthy. And that's not what we have right now. Again, guys, that's it for me. Hit the like button. Really, really helps me out with that algorithm nonsense. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications, please. And I will catch you in the next one.